Hey, welcome back to Archetypical. This is Jason Webster from Archetype, and this is Sammy. Welcome, Sammy.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.
It's good to have you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at Archetypical, we kind of want to jump into kind of the daily ongoings of Archetype, kind of dig into who we are, the problems we're solving, the work we do. And Sammy joined us in the last year from Austin, Texas.
Correct.
And has, to say it lightly, kind of jumped into a couple areas pretty deeply and started to make some differences around the business. And so we appreciate having you on board.
It's a pleasure.
How's it been for you?
It's been amazing. I've really enjoyed my time here. There's so many opportunities, and I'm just grateful to be a part of this team.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're making a difference and causing some controversy, which is always good.
That's always a good thing. Yeah, it's my LinkedIn profile says disruptor, so yeah, definitely enjoy that.
But we're not here to talk all day about Sammy as much as you'd like to talk about yourself for 3 hours. We are here to talk about your podcast series.
Correct.
Of which you've posted a few episodes and they're blowing up the internet.
Yeah.
And you call it Fragile.
Correct.
What's Fragile?
Yeah. Well, the idea came to me one day because I was thinking about these agile transformations that I've been a part of, and Jason, they're painful, to be honest. It's every single one that I've been a part of has failed in some manner, and I was tired of them failing. And honestly, I caused some of those failures. So
stop right there.
Yeah.
If you're not a nerd or in business or IT, go watch something else or Wiki Agile. And when you're back from that, you pick up the conversation from here.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah. So, like I said, I've been part of those disruptions, and I always used to think they were healthy. And I realized that there is a certain amount of healthy disruption that one can have in a market and in a business, but it's not healthy if all you're doing is disruption for the sake of disruption.
Well, same could be said about if there's no disruption at all, you're not growing, you're not innovating.
Exactly. Yeah. Correct. So the Fragile series came about because I figured that it was time to stop just talking and actually do something to get the word out. I've been trained in almost every agile project management methodology out there, from Kanban to Scrum. I've received all those certifications, Scaled Agile Framework, and I realized that the inherent problem with most agile project management methodologies is that they want you to follow a script. And once you start to dig in and realize why they want you to follow a script is because there's a business and industry around it, right? People have made their entire careers around
like CrossFit.
Exactly. CrossFit is an example, and anything that people have made entire business decisions and industries based on it. Of course, they want you to follow their script. Right.
I mean, there's a series and sequence to which American Girl dolls you have to buy for your daughter. In what order? I've learned that with my daughters. So
how many are in your household?
I have 2 daughters, and
American Girl dolls.
More than 2. More than 2 American Girl dolls.
Yep, understand. So the podcast that we're putting out, or the videos and the blog posts that we've been putting out there, really is intended to get out there and help people solution it. I think the crux of it is the people are the problem. Yeah. And really that's kind of with anything that you look at business-wise, right? Yeah. The processes, you can over-engineer a process, but it's really about the people and the way they execute on those things. Yeah. And so this is more about trying to help people get out there and change, starting small. And we feel like we need to overcomplicate things, and it's not intentional. I don't think that anybody intentionally overcomplicates the work that they're doing.
Right.
The intention here is simplify, start simple, and don't expect everybody that is just starting their agile transformation themselves to just jump in and fully adopt it. Help them get to that point.
Well, the metaphor you use heavily is jazz.
Correct.
Right? And I think, I guess for starters, just kind of walk us through that metaphor.
Yeah. So I was watching, if you've watched any of the videos or read the blog post, I was watching this series on HBO, and I highly recommend it. It is very much rated R for those that are out there. So don't watch it with children around.
That's why it's HBO Max.
It's HBO Max, and it's about the Lakers with Magic Johnson and his endeavors there. But the coach at the time took over the team, and he was kind of employing this new concept of the Lakers fast break, right? And that's what he wanted to show. And there was this this scene, and we're hoping that we can show that scene at some point. But he talks about the transformation from being part of an orchestra into jazz. And really what they're doing is you're trusting the team that you have.
Yeah.
Right. So if you follow the script, everything is predictable, and there's a beauty in predictability, of course, right?
Yeah.
But predictability also means that you can't allow the team to improvise. And oftentimes, if you ask somebody for a specific result, you're going to get that result and you won't be disappointed.
Yeah.
But if you tell them the direction that you want them to go in without telling them the end result and what your demand is, you'll be surprised at what they can produce. And that's kind of the inherent qualities of jazz, is they're always riffing. They're playing off of each other. They're feeding off of each other's energy. They trust each other. And that's really, when it comes to a team, that's the expectations that you should have of your colleagues and your cohorts is, look, we're going to produce, but I think we can do better than we think we can and that others think we can, just because we are in control of this.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm double-minded on the topic.
Yeah.
As a father of two boys who knows nothing about basketball, I've had the pleasure of watching the Celtics over the last, 5, 6, 7 years rebuild their team virtually from scratch around some really young, talented guys. Jaylen Brown's my favorite, but Jason Tatum obviously is the star of the team, and he's like off to the races this year. And when I watch that team play together, Marcus Smart, I mean, there's a whole mix of players. Like, I actually would describe it as jazz. There's certain harmonies that show up, like in terms of how Marcus Smart works with, Jason Tatum, or what role Jaylen Brown plays in the game. Because oftentimes I think Jaylen Brown's the big disruptor. He just kind of changes the game very, very quickly. But so I love that picture of these humans doing. They're on the same page on what the goal is, but they approach it with this flexibility.
Correct.
That is really, really cool to watch. And every team looks a little different in basketball. I'm nowhere near the expert. So I get that part of it. And that feels comfortable. It feels warm to think about. And I would love to start describing our work as we're like the Celtics of consulting, right? I'd be very proud of that. A lot of banners, a lot of victories, great reputation. But there's another part of me as an owner and CEO is like, hey, that jazz sounds risky. I think I like, when I'm thinking about project management, I like rules, I like deadlines, I like structure. That jazz thing sounds a little bit too improvisational, which is exactly why we call it jazz.
Right.
So help me understand, for a guy who hears risk and says, oh my gosh, that's scary, talk me through it. Bring me down, bring me back from the edge.
Right. I think the way that you referenced it, by the way, I like it. You say that you're bought into this, but, and I call that a butt wipe, by the way. So what you've done is you've kind of wiped all that quality
Rewind
stuff out of the way. And
a lot of good things and take them all back.
But there's no value. I agree with you. That can be scary. Of course, when it comes down to working in a business, you need predictability. Where are we standing? And especially as it pertains to project management. I can't tell you, Jason, and this is actually very common where I'm going with this. I'm glad you said this, because many people that work in an agile environment, I've worked with many developers, and they'll tell you, sorry, we're agile, I can't give you a due date. Right? And that's completely unacceptable.
I fire people for less. I have not. I'm just saying it. It sounds good on the camera.
I would fire people.
I would definitely fire people for less.
But no, that's it. And I've heard that before.
Yeah.
And that's a bunch of bullocks, honestly. You can't just tell someone, oh, we don't know because we're agile. That defeats the whole purpose, right? Go look up the definition of agile.
I mean, you can call it agile, you just can't call it project management.
There we go. Right. Or you can't call it running a business. I mean, you have to have deadlines, you have to have due dates, and you have to commit to things. Yeah. Going back to your question, why is this jazz? How can I pull you off the ledge?
Yeah.
Well, jazz musicians don't just show up to an event and just say, we don't know what we're playing.
True.
They still have a song that they're playing with. There's still a format, right? And what jazz allows them to do is riff a little bit to make it better, right? So they may take a song and they know how they're going to play that song, and the pianist throws in a new key, and all of a sudden the bass is running a new line, the drummer's following along, and all of a sudden they've just made that song a little bit better, and they'll take that to the next show and they'll add that piece in. And that's where I'm going with jazz, is this allows the team to improve where they need to improve. And it's all about satisfying the needs of the team rather than following this script saying, you must, you must, you must. It's pulling the playbooks open and saying, okay, this play works for this team. That makes sense to have a stand-up, but maybe it's not a daily stand-up. Maybe you just need a time every week to sync up as a team and discuss the work that you're working on.
But isn't this like a Maverick, Tom Cruise kind of conversation? Or like, buzzing the tower at, 500 knots and all this stuff. I mean, I say that because at the end of the day, we think about fighter pilots. My brother was a Navy pilot.
Yep.
We talk about being a pilot, and pilots are all about checklists, right?
Right.
And they have a lot of information in their heads. They're flying within an envelope, right? Which is basically, if you go outside the envelope, whether it's speed or altitude, you're basically going to kill yourself. And they live in this world where those checklists really keep them alive and make them successful in every type of flying.
Correct.
Then you add in like the Tom Cruise Maverick kind of character, which is like he kind of bends or breaks every rule there is, and somehow he's better at what he's doing. It's like I don't think the Navy buys into the Maverick model. They love Top Gun because they're like they can be the stars, but like I don't think the Navy and naval aviation buys into this Maverick concept. Do you think they do?
I agree with you. He'd be in jail if it were real life.
Maybe.
But I guess let me ask you.
Was it a butt wipe?
That was let me
just checking.
thanks for pointing it out. Yeah. So it makes me aware of how I'm using it as well. Let me ask you the checklist that these pilots have to follow. Could you go fly a plane without being trained to go fly a plane? Could I give you a checklist and say you're ready to fly?
No, but I do have a story for that one. But yeah, no, you're right. No,
right. So I can't just hand you a checklist and say, go follow the checklist. And these checklists that these pilots follow are also intended to trigger a response of other things that they know how to do, they know to do with their training.
Right.
So check flaps doesn't mean I just check the flaps and then I move on to the next step that's on the checklist. Check flaps triggers the next series of steps that I'm trained to do because I'm a pilot. Right. And so with the way that these teams have to function, oftentimes we bring in a specialist that's an agile practitioner. We say, here's the checklist. Go follow the checklist and follow it to the T, and you're going to be successful. Right. We're not taking the time to go train the other people in the team to go operate in these manners and methodologies. So there is kind of a component of, we need that checklist and we do need some structure, but we also need to be educating the team on why these things are important, right?
Yeah,
taking a moment and saying, Jason, let me understand, first of all, the problems that you're having. Let me observe your processes. Not many people like it when I come in and just move your cheese. Well, why are you moving your cheese? Because the executive told me to go move your cheese. Well, that's even worse than me coming in and just moving it kind of ad hoc. Yeah. So what we need to be doing better is helping people understand the why behind the change, right? Okay. And then getting people to adopt the process because it actually solves for the pain points they have. Okay. Many agile practitioners just come in, they couldn't pinpoint any pain that Jason has, any pain that Mitchell has, any pain that Fred has, right?
Well, now you're talking my language because I think at the end of the day, no one ever, and I've said this to our salespeople before, where like, hey, nobody wants to hire consultants. Like, you don't wake up and say, hey, I'm bored. Let's go get some consultants in here. Let's go spend a lot of money like drunken sailors and have a bunch of people walking around and with PowerPoints. Like, no, the reason we're invited in is because there's a problem to solve that has real implication to top line or bottom line.
Correct.
Hey, if we can fix this problem, we can grow more revenue. Or, hey, if we can't figure out how to manage X, Y, or Z, we're taking on too much expense.
Correct.
So we get invited in. They pay us sometimes a lot of money. We love the work we're doing. We love driving success. But when we walk away, we have to be able to high five and say, we nailed the tangible ROI. Right. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's like, I kind of try to push our teams before they even break ground. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, can we actually, in the client's own language, define a real tangible ROI here?
Right.
And if you can't, how about we just delay a few more days and you have a couple more conversations, because I trust, I firmly believe that our customers are going to be grateful that somebody on their end of the conversation said, hey, if we spend $50 on archetype, we're going to get $100 back in 2 years. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I have the numbers to prove it here.
Right.
So that what you just said there, this is the opposite of a butt wipe, is like, what's the opposite of a butt wipe? is
We're not going to even
we're not
go
gonna
there.
But when you're doubling down and saying, hey, listen, here's some incremental value that if we take some attention and focus away from a overly engineered process, and we focus on some really important questions like, hey, what's the tangible ROI? That to me is a very, very positive trade-off.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think as part of this, there is the agile training that everybody needs, right? They have to at least understand the concepts behind the why. Again, it's the why. Why do these things
Yeah,
even
if we address
exist?
like what makes agile better, like I don't think we really addressed like waterfall versus agile. So like,
Correct.
for the sake of our audience, waterfall projects are like most projects that we think about taking on, where you do one thing at a time, you get to a deadline, then you do step 2, then step 3, but you don't really do step 3 and step 1 at the same time because that's illogical. But actually, in the real world, if you think about how humans work and like cooking and all these other things, like those things aren't serial in nature. They're not purely sequential. Like cooking. Cooking doesn't mean you don't have to do step 1 before step 2 always. You can do step 1 and 2 in parallel. So if we look at the world and say, hey, there's a lot of things we can do in parallel, and we can start to get feedback along the way, we now have a whole new perspective on getting work done, which is kind of how I describe Agile.
Correct. And there's also, Agile was created, this concept of Agile Project Management really started with software development.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of the point that I'm trying to drive home with these blog posts as well is, the people refer to it as the Agile Manifesto. It's the manifesto for Agile software development, right? So it really was designed and built to solve for problems that they were experiencing in software. Well, of course, it made sense with software. You develop these lines of code, and if you're not doing it in an agile way, well, then you go back and you debug everything at the end, and you realize, I have an error. How far back do you have to go to find out where that bug was? Doing demos, right? What did that solve for? Well, there's a famous case of a consulting firm that was working with a client, and they were gathering design requirements from the beginning, spent a year on it, and the client made assumptions that that consulting firm was also building the software. So a year later, they asked the consulting firm, okay, can we see a demo of the platform? And they said, oh, well, we've been doing discovery and gathering requirements this whole time. We have nothing to show you. Well, okay, that's why demos are there, right?
Yeah, sure.
Let's validate what I heard, right? For example, acceptance criteria within a user story. Why does that exist? There's a why behind all of these things, right? Why does acceptance criteria exist? Well, Jason comes to me and says, Sammy, I want you to design this button on my webpage. Okay. Well, do you want it to be a square button, a round button? What color do you want? And I get those requirements, and then I put the acceptance criteria in that story. And then when I demo it to you and you go, wait, I told you I wanted a round button. And I say, well, no, here's the acceptance criteria where you said it's a square button with a blue background and white font, right? So all of these things have reasons behind them. Now, my point is you have to think about if that's needed for every scenario and every team. Oftentimes it's not. Right. Am I going to demo to Jason and I'm working on my own individual stuff and I show you, hey, here are the things that I produced, and you go, oh, good for you, Sammy. Here's a pat on the back, and that's all it's solved for. I don't need to do demos.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of the point of this blog is really to push people away from just doing an agile transformation and understanding and quantifying the value that it brings. Right.
Yeah. I mean, to me, like that's kind of obvious on its face in the sense that the way I always phrase it is, oftentimes we're building something new for our customers they've never seen before. So it's like building the first car or building the first rocket to go to the moon. And we come back and say, how many rocket boosters you want in your rocket? And like,
you tell me.
Right?
Exactly.
So that kind of forces the point. It's like, hey, we probably need to have a lot of show and tell here to make sure we're tracking with our customer, because I'm not sure they know what they're getting into, or do they really understand what they're buying. And so what we want is we want joy at the end of the project. Might be some pain throughout, but there's joy at the end.
Right.
And if there's joy at the end, it means that we've somehow met or exceeded expectations.
Right.
And to do that, we need to understand expectations and reset sometimes. Right. So I think I have one more question, because I think we're probably, kind of wrapping up here soon.
Okay.
But so when I think about this agile kind of framework, what I hear is like, I've seen some of these manifestos, and I think manifestos have some kind of, they're very special to like IT software guys and serial killers. So I'm not quite sure why, but there's a lot of structure there in those manifestos, and I get that. But you're suggesting something I think is much more palatable and digestible.
Correct.
I think my next question is, okay, so if we're deploying this, is it the chef, the kitchen, or the menu you want to control?
Great question. So I think you're not wanting to control any individual. Okay. So it's really all about the kitchen, because every single one of the people in the kitchen is going to determine the success of the overall restaurant.
Absolutely.
Okay. So if you were to just put a process built around a chef and you never focused on the front of the restaurant, right, and you didn't focus on the process in the kitchen, would you have a successful restaurant? No. Right. So you do have to focus on everyone from the busboys all the way up to the chef, and then everybody in between. So the process has to work for the entire group. Now, that's critical because some people may not be able to plug into that team and work in that process. Right. And that's okay. That's why in the blog post,
and that's when the rules of the kitchen prevail.
Exactly. It's the right time with the right team is what I referenced, right? You may not have the right team, and that's okay. You have to acknowledge, hey, this person is breaking our process, and this process works really well for 7 out of 8 of the people, right? That 8th person, you definitely need to listen to them, listen to their feedback and gather and see where the value is. But you also need to help them kind of be a part of that team and part of that process.
I mean, it makes me think of, we're here in Boston on the end of a 20-year run of just unbelievable success in football. And I'll like to remind Sammy here from Texas that his Cowboys, his Houston Texans, whoever they are, it's not the same.
They'll come back.
They will. But they had a locker room. They had rules that they ran by, which I don't think were actually easy to live with. And they drove a lot of great players away. But those who stayed saw success.
Right.
Now we'll see what comes next. I mean, the future is uncertain, but I think that's kind of a similar way that you can plug in great receivers who were expected to change the world. They leave. Someone comes in who's like a 3rd round draft pick, and he's now making the difference. Right, that's great. However, I will say one thing. I've seen 2 or 3 of those parades through Boston after the Patriots win the Super Bowl. And I remember one year, I think it was the last one we watched, and here comes the duck boat with Bill Belichick on the duck boat, and he starts chanting, "No days off, no days off." And all of a sudden, this crowd that's incredibly exuberant and very loud gets quiet, because I don't think there's anyone in Boston who wants to say, no days off, no days off. It's just that's where being number one and being the number one fan are different.
Right, absolutely. I think, and one thing I want to point out as well is understanding the value of Agile is really about, it's seeing the work. And I think that's where a lot of people don't understand it's critical to your success. So if you came to me and I had all of this work, and a lot of development teams do this, a lot of other teams do this, where there's no way of tracking what they're working on. And it's not necessarily because I want to micromanage these teams. But if you come to me and you say, Sammy, what are you working on? And I list off all of these initiatives that I'm working on, that's great. That's one piece of feedback that you can receive. That's one data point. It's much more powerful when I can come to you and say, Jason, here are all the things that I'm working on. Here's my board. Visually, it's more impactful. I show you that there's a process, that I'm thinking about these things, right? The basics of any board, it's to do, in progress, and done. And if you think about it and you start there, then you start to realize there's only so much capacity that you can handle, right? And then you start to become more predictable. So when I say start small, start slow, it's really just identifying at that one point in time, what is the thing that we need right now? And sometimes it's just, I need to see my work. I don't have a way of seeing my work, right? It may be, we're bleeding out capacity. I need more capacity. Okay, great. Well, let's quantify your capacity right now, because you're telling me you're busy, but you're not showing me how you're busy, right? And I think that's
Sometimes
really the value.
Fixing that is not about taking work away; it's reprioritizing work.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and having those discussions and negotiations, and executives, none not pointing any fingers, love to put more work on other people, saying, "Hey, you can handle this, right?" And of course, it's hard for people to say no, right? But if I come to you and you say, Sammy, I need you to go focus on this, and I show you, I say, okay, Jason, here are the other 5 things that I'm working on right now.
Yeah,
I'm happy to work on the one that you want me to go work on.
Yeah.
Which one do you want me to drop?
yeah.
And
None
then
of
we
them.
have that. Yeah, exactly.
I don't think you understood me. Did I misspeak?
That's right. Yeah.
No.
No more days off,
You're right.
right? That's
exactly.
the chant.
No more days. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, it's been a pleasure. I think
Thank you
we've
so
touched on
much.
a lot. There's a lot more to this than just us chatting back and forth, but we certainly appreciate your hanging with us here and stand by for more.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Sammy.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Yeah.